intensive gardening, which means that you squeeze stuff in closer usually than what a seed packet says. I was going to talk about onions because I have my onions started and I need to repot some of them. I started onions on January 11th and I have several different kinds that I started, so I'm going to walk through them. You can do onions from seeds, sets, or plants. I start the seeds, like I said, in mid-January, beginning of February at the latest, because it does take them a long time to get going. One trick that I learned a couple years ago when growing them is after they start getting about this tall, I just give them all a nice haircut. And I do this, every time they get up to a good height until I plant them out into the garden. This just stimulates them to bulk up more at the roots, which is what you want for an onion, of course. So these I am going to give a haircut to before I replant them because it's just going to make them easier to handle. And the best part about this is you can put these in your salad tonight. And I always tip it to the side because otherwise it's a hassle to try to get the greens up out of there. And of course my direction for tipping is opposite of what the camera is today. And it smells amazing like onions in here now. So these you can save, which I really didn't even bring a container to save them for dinner, but we'll put them in there. Because this tray I was going to use to divide these up into. And this is my favorite container to sow onions in. And those of you that are Costco members might recognize it. It is an upside down Costco chicken container. I love them because they have 4 vent holes in it, which is perfect for drainage. I use the black part to cover it to keep the moisture in when I first sow the seed, and it works perfectly as a little greenhouse container. But I was out of Costco chicken containers this year, so I did a couple other makeshift containers that I dug out of the Tupperware drawer that did not have lids. So this is a globe onion that I bought the seed last year from Baker Creek. So this is leftover from last year. It came up fairly decent. If you look down in here, there's quite a few that have come up. This is a red onion that we absolutely loved last year. They didn't get very big, but they were delicious. The seed packet was also from last year, so I did not anticipate all of them to come up. However, you can see they are super duper thick, and there's not enough room in here for these to get bigger in order to grow. So these are the ones that I'm going to have to separate and put into a bigger container because I want them to bulk up a little bit before they go outside. So these I'm putting in clusters of, I would prefer 2 or 3, but sometimes they don't separate that well. So they might be a little bit bigger. But they're super hardy with their roots. They really don't mind being manhandled like this, to where some other plants, this would be the end of them if you did this to them. But onions are pretty hardy. With a nice grow light or a super bright windowsill, they do fairly well because they're very low maintenance. And like with these, where they have enough space in here, even though some of them are clustered together in little clumps, there's enough room that they still have room to spread out in this container until I plant them outside. But these are way too congested. So let's see if we can get them out of here. And whenever you start them, you do want to use a container that is a little bit deeper because for onions, that's what you're growing is the root. And that's why I love Costco chicken containers. So I'm just going to pull them apart. And onions, I don't bother with cells because they pull apart super duper easy. They have these very long linear roots that don't spread out like other plants. And it's okay to plant a couple of them in a cluster like this. They'll still do okay. And then I can even divide that a little bit more when they go out into the garden. The tray that I'm planting them in is a the top to like a party platter that came from a deli somewhere. I punched some holes in it this morning because I wanted something that was going to have the depth to it, but not, I don't want to use up one of my other planting trays because when I start growing tons of tomatoes, there's going to be a lot of room, or I'm not going to have enough trays. So I have one of these cool little tools, which I hardly ever use because I end up using my fingers. But when I put the soil in this tray, one trick that I learned that I also do with my houseplants is I put it pretty much full, you know, and then you want to tamp it to get all the air pockets out of the soil. But then I go around with my fingers and I tuck it in like you're tucking a little kid in for bed all the way around, because it gives it a denser soil around the outside so that when you water it, the water doesn't just run to the outside and down and the plants in the center don't get any. So by packing it tighter around the edges, when you water it, it funnels the water back into the middle where the plants are. So I'm going to slowly divide up this whole tray and just space these out in here. And now that I've broken it apart, there's enough in here. I might have to stop midway and go find something else to plant more onions in. Like I said, I totally did not anticipate all of these seeds to come up and germinate, which is why I planted the entire remaining packet. And I planted last year about half of this packet. And I think, you know, the half that I planted this year, more came up this year than last year when it was a brand new packet of seeds. Go figure. Getting these in here, I'm just putting them in like little plugs, so when they get bigger in a couple months and they go out into the garden, they'll be easy to pull out of here. But it looks like I'm only going to make it probably about halfway through with what I have in this container. So we'll show you the final results when it's all done. And then I'm just going to keep watering these, keep them under the lights, and as they get tall, just continue to trim them off as they need it until spring, and then they'll get planted out. I'm not the best record keeper, but I'm trying. So I was surprised when I looked at last year, some things like the number of tomato plants and stuff that I ended up with. I did better than I thought I did, which was really helpful, and I was proud of myself this year because it really helped me in deciding what I was going to sow this year, especially for starts for sale for tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. When you're gardening in the 90s in the Midwest with all the old codgers that have been gardening for years and have a wealth of knowledge, they think you're crazy when you plant stuff like this, but these days, it's the in thing. It's called intensive gardening. And usually the plants do fine. It depends on the plants. You know, some plants need more space, but it chokes out weeds. You have less room for weeds to come up, less weeding that you have to do, less competition, less watering, because your soil is covered and not exposed. Helps with moisture retention. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have another container for these onions because you can see, I know, it sounds like folklore, but it really works. Biodynamics. So, funny story, I learned about biodynamics from my husband. So he sowed seeds according to the moon cycle is how you plant your biodynamic seeds, and by the biodynamic calendar. Well, he was totally right, honey, because the seeds that he planted, not only more of them sprouted, they came up quicker, they just did better overall. It was unbelievable the difference that we had in the seeds that year.